Who does economics tell us we are? To make humanity fit into their theories, last century's economists invented rational economic man. He stands alone, with money in his hand, a calculator in his head, ego in his heart, and nature at his feet. He hates work, loves luxury, has insatiable wants, and knows the price of everything. But the trouble is this: on being told that he is like us, we actually become more like him. Researchers have discovered that the more that economic students study this Homo economicus, the more self-interested they become. Rational economic man is damaging our societies and the living world. We can no longer afford to gaze at his image, which is why it's time for a new portrait of humanity at the heart of economics. One which recognises that our brains are wired for empathy, cooperation and mutual aid. That instead of being fixed, our wants change as and when our values do. And far from being dominant over nature, we're deeply dependent upon her. With these new beginnings of a self-portrait, how can economics start to nurture human nature and give us a far greater chance of thriving in the 21st century?
I guess I've for a long time had an interest in alternative economic models. I recognise that many of the problems that the world experiences today fundamentally comes down to the current economic model, and I recognise that as being unsustainable. And it was of particular interest to me because the way that I run my business, I try to incorporate many of the principles that are in keeping with Doughnut Economics.
The problems relating to our particular place on the planet in Cambridge, our major problem is our brand. Everybody's heard of Cambridge. But what they don't realise is that it's quite a hollow brand, and we need to build it up and strengthen it so that everybody in Cambridge thrives and people don't come here under false pretences.
What I see in my role as a city councillor is that the economic growth that's been happening in Cambridge, that's been particularly accelerating, is leaving a lot of people behind. The idea of trickle-down economics isn't benefiting the people that need to be benefited from it. We have got a housing affordability crisis. Local governments are unable to afford, for example, to properly fill potholes in roads, and local governments are having to make massive cuts to services that we would consider essential. So that's why I think we need to look for a radical alternative which prioritises people's well-being rather than the pursuit of a higher GDP.
The Doughnut Economics Action Lab is a set of tools that hopefully allow us to leave behind our old concepts of what an economy might look like and how it might work, and to get down to the more human level, the level that Schumacher was so interested in 50 years ago.
If we could discuss and try and reach a consensus on what these criteria should be, then we've got the basis of deciding what actions we want to take. And if one thinks about it, this is common sense. This is what we do in our normal lives. If you're in your family or with your groups of friends, when you make decisions, you think about the impact on yourself and those around you. Unfortunately, when we go to the beyond the individual level, beyond the family level, it's more difficult because there are lots of voices that are involved, and therefore having an agreed plan, having an agreed model that we can discuss and therefore agree the things that are important to us, then we stand a chance of reaching a consensus. But also it allows us to measure these criteria as well, which I think is very important.
As a person, I strongly believe in the power of a group of people to come together and change things, and I think that's what we're trying to do at CamDEAG. It's not a simple thing we're trying to do like plant trees or clean up a street, which is important, but there's also thinking about why something happens and all these systems behind it, all the capitalist systems that lead to these inequalities in the first place, and that's why I'm part of this group, and I hope that we can actually make some change.
I'd love to see Doughnut Economics manifest themselves through the creation of the Cambridge Food Hub. Cambridge Food Hub is going to implement new techniques in local food supply chain coordination that are very much in keeping with the principles of Doughnut Economics, and which will help us to not only achieve a far more sustainable local food system, but also stimulate a vibrant local food economy.
Well, Cambridge faces acute problems relating to climate change, like everywhere else. Cambridge also faces acute problems relating to inequality, even more than in many other places. And what Doughnut Economics does is it forces you objectively to consider both human costs, environmental costs, human resources and environmental resources, and tries to bring those into balance. So I think it could be immensely valuable if it were to be integrated into the thinking, particularly in spheres like planning. So if it were really embedded in the planning process, then I think it could make a tremendous difference.
I enjoy working with CamDEAG and meeting people at fairs such as green fairs and festivals where we have a stall and we can actually meet people and explain a bit about Doughnut Economics. And it's the power of imagination, just opening people's minds to something different is quite a key a factor in just changing the world. If you can actually think that there might be a different way of doing things, then you can affect a lot of people and change how we do stuff.
So I think Doughnut Economics in Cambridge would bring a circular economy, and it would ensure the common good. The common good meaning also the good of the people right around the globe, because Cambridge is a microcosm of the globe.
The Doughnut Economics Action Lab, which supports donut groups all over the world, has a fantastic set of practical tools and resources that local groups can use. So it's not just a theoretical concept. It comes with really practical methods and ideas of what you can do locally, what we can do in our own communities to really make things happen and change. So it's very exciting to be part of CamDEAG.